Carl-Jung on the inflated ego, or as modern psychology calls it, narcissism. I was listening to a video earlier, and from Carl Jung, where he described a series of pillars that scream narcissism, but also cult member from this church. So let's just read off Carl Jung. Carl Jung defined the inflated ego as the unconscious expansion of the personality beyond its proper limits, where the ego identifies with the archetypes of the persona, resulting in an unrealistic self-importance, grandiosity, and profound insecurity. Those hit all the points of a narcissist. Every point. Because a narcissist cannot differentiate their own ego from themselves. It is a false high, often making the deep inferiority often masking deep inferiority, causing detachment from reality, rigidity, and eventual psychological collapse. Remember, Friedrich Nietzsche went crazy because of his own philosophies. They drove him insane. Much like the guy that started this church was driven insane. And much like some of their church leaders, whether they admit it or not, have gone fucking nuts. This is a thing with the ego. But we're going to get into the deeper discussion in this. The causes is often a rise of over-identification with the persona, social mask from the archetype experience, intense power or spiritual experience that overwhelm the ego. The role of the shadow in an inflated ego vigorously represses the shadow, unacceptable aspects of oneself, causing these repressed traits to be projected onto others, often resulting in judgmental behavior. The inevitable fall, because the inflated ego detached from reality, it is fragile and doomed to catastrophic failure. The solution, Jung argued, for building a sturdy, grounded ego that acts as a servant, not as a tyrant, and learning to sit with the tension of the opposites, rather than inflating to avoid discomfort. Blondie went on a rant about the problem with me is I like to be comfortable, and I was like, well, you just have a problem with everybody because I think everybody likes to be comfortable. He doesn't like being uncomfortable. And not just Blondie. Every church leader is a malignant narcissist, so that description describes every one of them. So we're just going to switch to every church leader. But specifically the discussion I had with Blondie. He said to me, well, there's no way I could be a narcissist, or I could have a massive ego. That's impossible, because I can't be hypnotized. To which I replied in that conversation, oh man, it's a good thing you don't have, you didn't give yourself dissociative identity disorder that acts as a barrier so your ego can inflate out of control without any form of regulation because you think you can't be hypnotized. Which is exactly what he is. And it is what every church leader is. People with massive egos that project their egos onto everybody else. Or not their egos, their insecurities onto everybody else. Now, when I was learning about this ego thing, it was pretty funny because Jung literally talks about the inability to let things go, the inability to show any form of self-control or self-discipline correctly, and among all else, appears to be almost demonically possessed, the behavior. And think about my description of Stu, or any of these church members for that matter, with the what am I doing? Kind of shit. This is a wonderful description of exactly what this guy Carl Jung was talking about with the inflated ego. The entire description of almost being demonically possessed describes every fucking member of this church. Even my cuddle buddy. I'll give you a story about this. When I was at Papa John's, one of the guys brought in a poisoned coffee, and I kept putting it down and walking away, and he kept picking it up, and he was like, and I thought he had Tourette's. And I literally told Chris Bennett, it's like, I think the new guy has Tourette's. And Chris rolled his eyes. Because the guy was trying to murder me and failing. And what was coming out was the ego. And what Carl Jung talks about is the ego is supposed to be a servant. When the ego takes over the mind, when it fools you into believing it's the persona, is where the issue comes. Because that's where the tyrant comes from. That is where Blondie and every malignant narcissistic church leader comes from. That is where all the control issues come from. Okay. This isn't anything complicated. It's actually really stupid. And it makes sense because this feeds into Bobby psychology, where I talked about, I believe the ego had a conscience of its own, and the superego has a conscience of its own, and these entities all have consciousness. It implies the ego does have a conscience of its own because it can hijack your mind if given the right diameters to hijack your mind. And this annoys me because I was literally just listening to like some yoga shit on my computer when it just randomly started playing Carl Jung and the inflated ego, and how people with massive egos can't let things go. They don't know when to stop. They don't know, and that ain't what this is. That ain't what this is. You see, the issue here is, once again, narcissists don't do real psychology, they do projection. And they are every mental issue personified. They are emotionally stunted, they are inferiority complexes, and they hide all their mental illness behind a facade. That is why they are intimate. They intimately know every personality and every personality disorder, and they know how to manipulate them because they know what would work on them would work on you. Unfortunately for Blondie, he was like, the guilt will make him do something when he was wrong, because I'm not him. And that is why you shouldn't project onto people. You should actually take the time to understand them. Worthy of note, one of the things I was reading was talking about the inverted mirror in psychology, where Carl Jung said that men that align with the feminine energy, the female energy, are often come off as more masculine, as opposed to men who align with the manly energy, who come off as feminine. And if you think about what I was talking about with the church leaders and Blondie and how he's super effeminate, and I didn't understand that. So I guess in Carl Jung's psychology, technically he's feeding off the manly man energy, but he's also super effeminate because of it, because everything works. It's the inverted mirror in psychology. I do find it funny because I've literally had girls literally tell me I give off major dad energy, so yeah. But we're just going to feed deeper into this darkness of the inflated ego with the discussion of each church member and how they're like, I'm not susceptible to the ego. Let me tell you something. The devil convincing you he doesn't exist is how the devil gets into your brain to begin with. Now, I'm not a religious person, that's just a quote I heard. The ego is the same way. The ego convincing you it doesn't exist, or you're immune to it, is exactly how it hijacks your mind to begin with. Your inability to separate ego from your conscious mind, which is something Blondie can't do, because everything in his brain is fused together. And I would argue this entire situation is all about teaching Blondie responsibility. Because had Blondie taken responsibility for his actions in Ackworth, where he poisoned me with heavy metals, we would have never gone down this path of, we need to guilt trip Bobby, I need to make everything his fault. Because in Blondie's brain, responsibility is blame, and he doesn't want to be blamed for the bad things that happened. He only wants the glory. It is funny as shit that Blondie was like, oh, you can reconcile everything with Friedrich Nietzsche and Carl Jung. No, Friedrich Nietzsche is the goddamn devil, okay? His psychology is that of the devil, okay? Carl Jung is basically God, to some extent, in my opinion, if you want to give these two people archetypes, because everything Friedrich Nietzsche does is destroy, 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 scream you're the victim in it. Whereas Carl Jung is understand, compute, integrate, develop. Compute, integrate, develop. This entire thing, you need, if you want evidence that Blondie and this church is nothing but ego, look no further than the church. It is literally nothing but a control system, and the ego desires nothing but control. And when the ego hijacks these people's brains, and they're like, that's the ego hijacking their brains. Like, I firmly believe that was the real them, but now that I comprehend it better, I guess the real them is the enslaved personality that is the slave to the ego. Blondie is a slave to his ego. He can't escape it, and he'll never be able to escape it. And it's funny that he's like, I'm the Ubermensch in the master race, when it's the other way around. He's the slave. And he's always been the slave. And he'll always be the slave. And he'll never escape it. And it doesn't matter how much money or wealth or anything, how many Mary Bowberries he steals from me, how many women he kills. No matter what he does, the issue's inside his own mind. And that is the saddest thing on the planet. But every one of the church leaders are the same way. Massive overinflated egos. Carl Jung made the comment that Friedrich Nietzsche was onto something. The issue was he let too many things alter his perception of what a true person was, and I would argue this is the difference probably between Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche, is Friedrich Nietzsche was a fucking lead brain. And because he was a lead brain, he wasn't socially acceptable and nobody liked him. And then he said this was the proper way to be, because look at me, I've murdered and killed my way up the ladder, I'm great. And then Carl Jung was like, yeah, but that wasn't necessary, was it? You had to do that because you're defective to begin with. I get tired because in my newsfeed there's a lot of mixing Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche, and I get the sneaking suspicion Blondie's behind that because he desperately wants Friedrich Nietzsche to be right when Friedrich Nietzsche is a handbook on how to become is doublespeak nihilism for dummies and how to become a narcissist. And it makes sense that once again an emotionally stunted person would love Friedrich Nietzsche because it is everything they already are. They just have to reach a little further and go beyond and turn into a disgusting creature like Blondie is. Blondie doesn't actually care about the people he's saving. What he wants is the glory. That is all he cares about. He wants the attention and he wants the love and admiration he didn't get as a kid. And that is exactly why he doesn't deserve it. And I know people are going to be like, oh, Bobby, you make these decisions, you make these. Blondie needs to learn what responsibility is. And I'll repeat that again. Blondie needs to learn what responsibility is. He goes through his life with no agency, and he's the victim in everything. And even his life story is he was the victim, and then he did this thing. And then he's still going to be the victim after that. Because playing the victim is safe and security. And that is the effect. This is the inverted goddess effect. This is the inverted Holy Mother Sybil effect Carl Jung was talking about. Through control and manipulation, Blondie becomes the one that gets comfort. He is comforted. Through the alignment with the female mother or whatever, the female energy gives you safety and security through love and compassion. Blondie gets it through manipulating and controlling everything and having all the power and everybody just letting him do whatever he wants. You see, if he actually experienced real consequences, he wouldn't be this thing. But ultimately, where that leads him is his own effeminate behavior. This is why he's a woman. And this is the Carl Jung explaining why masculine energy turns into female energy when projected outward. And I assume that happens every time. By the way. I did find it funny when I was listening to Carl Jung and he was like, they seem demonically possessed. Trust me. I remember Stu saying this in Ackworth, talking about the Scooby-Doo movie, and how he absolutely hated it, and it makes sense that he would hate it, because when the monsters jump out of the characters, they go, and then the demon jumps out. And the demon is the ego, by the way. And I think Stu saw that, and he saw himself. And once again, narcissists run screaming from their own inferiority. That is why everything Blondie does is about proving something. It's about, I gotta get back at you, I gotta do this, it's all external, it's all external, it's all external. Blondie himself, if he wins this unabated, will demonstrate nothing outside of the fact that the church is right. And you can beat, rape, waterboard, torture, poison somebody with tetralead, teach them Friedrich Nietzsche, and that person will become a superior being no matter what, because the church enables them and gives them everything they need. And you can kill 6 kids and 7 women and get away with it as long as everybody turns a blind eye and says, that's my religion, that's my religion. So what I say to that is, fuck your religion. But the issue is I'm the only person that says, fuck your religion. If it was left up to me in this situation, if I had real power over this entire thing, one, I would have shown me the masculine, Carl Jung's masculine energies video, but I remember Blondie explaining to me he doesn't want me to ever watch those videos, which is, I'm assuming, is why I just got them recently. Those would have been more useful than any of the shadow work I was doing, because the shadow work was stupid. And the majority of it wasn't even necessary, in my opinion. The other thing is, once again, pro se, I would have just sent somebody out with a federal fucking paper that was already filled out, hand it to me, and then sent me to the court to go file. Because I would have taken responsibility that way for sure. That's followed by the destroyed nervous system, the neurological issues, and all the neurotic issues I had. And I think about this entire venture down here. From the beginning to end, it was spiritual, it was mental blocks, it was physical blocks. Yes, physical. Neurological problems are physical. I needed specific vitamins and specific minerals and shit to get past them. There was no way around it. Those were the only things I needed, okay? And spiritual, finally. Spiritual, the pain in my neck was a masculine block. So we have mental, physical, and spiritual blocks that were all stopping me from doing the right thing. All created by this church in me to make me a horrible human being. And this just tells you how disgusting everybody in this church is. But I also think about the other aspect I was talking about when these people's egos are taking them over and you're asking for help and they're like, ah! They look like they're possessed. They look like they're possessed by somebody else because they're actively fighting their own values and they're actively fighting who they're supposed to be. Nobody in this church will ever get the opportunity to become who they are supposed to be. That includes Blondie. He will become what he thinks he's supposed to be because his ego pulls him down that path. Through violence, destruction, and vitriol. That is why he will forever be a failure. Regardless of what glory he achieves in this life. Once again, if people actually helped me, we wouldn't be in this situation. The only person that tried to help me is Giovanni, and he's probably the only good member of your church. And you murdered him. And you guys need to look at the kind of people you kill. Good people who do the right thing. And you murder them every time. They try to help one of the sex harems from one of the women from your sex harem. That's being human trafficked. She's being raped every night. They're going to eat her brains. You kill them. Why? Because your ego is inflated and you, in your self-righteousness, believe you're in the right when you're murdering good people. Nobody in this church has the ability to be a good person. But let's be honest, being good involves getting into heaven, and what you guys want is a planet so you can finally feel like you have control. And it'll never happen. You will never feel in control. Because control's an illusion, and you're chasing something that's not real.